I'm a puppet, Viv. They pull the strings, and I can't stop them. They make me do things, horrible things. And by the time I realize what's happening, it's too late. I can't undo it. I wake up with blood on my clothes sometimes. Vivian barely made it to the hotel's entrance when she crashed into a tall figure. Michael. Vivian! His eyes widened, gripping her arms to steady her as she nearly stumbled back. What the hell happened? Why are you running? And why are you soaking wet? She blinked, words stuck in her throat. She couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. Jason's confession echoed in her mind. The chip, the profilers, the mind control. The water clung to her skin, but it felt like she was still under the fountain, suffocating in disbelief. Michael's voice cut through the haze. Vivian, talk to me. What's going on? She swallowed hard, trying to push down the panic. I thought it was you. I came here for a date. But her mind raced for an explanation that didn't involve the terrifying truth she'd just learned. But I saw Jason. Michael's expression darkened. Jason? He was here? His gaze darted around as if expecting to see Jason lurking in the shadows. Vivian nodded, the lie rolling off her tongue before she could stop it. He's been leaving notes everywhere, Michael. I thought... She cut herself off, shaking her head. It doesn't matter. I just needed to get away. And you didn't call the police? Michael's voice was tight, like he was trying to keep his own anger in check. She laughed bitterly. What good would it do? They never catch him. He's always gone before anyone shows up. Michael's jaw clenched. This has to stop, Viv. You can't keep running every time he shows up. I know, she whispered. Michael was silent for a beat, scanning her drenched figure. His gaze softened, but there was something off in his eyes, something calculating. Why didn't you call me? She stared at him, suddenly on edge. I thought you were the one who set up the date, here at the hotel. Michael's frown deepened, and the uneasy silence stretched. Vivian, I didn't arrange anything. He looked at her, confusion now mixed with concern. Why would I do that and not show up? Her stomach dropped. Wait, then what are you doing here? Michael glanced away for a moment, almost too quickly. I had a meeting nearby. The explanation came too fast, too smooth, but he brushed it off with a shrug. I was on my way home when I saw you rush out of the fountain like you were being chased. I came to check if you were okay. Viv, listen to me, Michael said, stepping closer, his hands resting firmly on her shoulders. You've got to stop letting him get to you. Let's go. I'll take you home. She nodded numbly, but as he guided her toward the parking lot, a nagging thought lodged itself in her mind. If Michael wasn't the one who arranged the date, then why was he here, at the exact moment she needed him? As she slipped into the passenger seat of Michael's car, her mind raced back to Jason's warning. They're always watching. She shuddered, unable to shake the feeling that she was missing something big. When they got to her place, Michael leaned in, brushing a damp strand of hair away from her face. I'll stay tonight if you need me to, just to make sure you're safe. Vivian tensed. She wasn't sure she wanted him there, especially now. I'll be okay, she said, quickly shaking her head. I just need to be alone for a bit, to think. Michael hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly, but then he nodded. All right. Call me if you need anything. She slammed her door shut behind her and headed straight for the cabinet in her living room. She pulled it open and began rifling through papers and old mail until she found them. The stack of notes Jason had left her over the past few months. Her fingers grazed over the crumpled edges, and she tossed them onto the coffee table. Exhausted and hungry, she grabbed a bowl of ice cream from the freezer and a spoon. Her mind was spinning real fast, but she needed to slow down and think. She dug into the ice cream absent-mindedly, her eyes scanning the first note Jason had left. It was the same one she had read countless times. But now, after what Jason had revealed, everything felt different. The words seemed off, but she couldn't pinpoint why. "Hey, gorgeous, I can't stop thinking about you," she sighed, frustrated. Nothing made sense. She flipped to the next note, feeling the familiar paper between her fingers. As she did, a drop of ice cream fell onto the note, smearing across the words. "Ugh," she sighed. She grabbed a napkin and wiped at the spot. But something strange happened. As the light hit the paper at a certain angle, faint letters appeared beneath the ink. Vivian blinked twice. She held the note up closer to the light. There was something hidden beneath the words. Invisible ink. Her pulse quickened as she squinted to make out the faint letters. She grabbed another note and held it under the light. Again, the same thing. Faint, hidden words beneath Jason's original messages. Quickly, she gathered all the notes and began examining each one, dabbing them in water, wiping carefully, holding them up to the light. With every note, more hidden messages appeared. And they weren't random. They were detailed. Addresses, coordinates, dates, names. All hidden beneath his desperate pleas. There was one note in particular that sent her stomach into knots. It was the most recent one, the one that had first seemed to be a random cry for help. Now, under the light, the message beneath it read, April 13th, meet me at Pier 39, 9 p.m. come alone. Pier 39? Her fingers brushed over the faintly revealed message written in invisible ink. The meeting was just 2 days away. She couldn't believe it. Jason had been trying to communicate with her all along, but in a way that the company wouldn't notice. Every note had been more than just a desperate cry. It had been a puzzle, a code. The hidden messages painted a chilling picture. He had been tracking the movements of the profilers, locations where they operated, where they met. There were names of doctors, locations of labs, and suddenly it clicked. The hidden names on the notes were doctors she had seen in meetings, people she had networked with. The places listed were labs she had visited in passing, thinking they were just ordinary research facilities. She leaned back, half relieved that she found the hidden messages just in time, but also worried about what she was dipping her feet into. She was so restless as she took out her phone to give Jessica a call and rave about her new discovery, but it went straight to voicemail. The day of the meeting at Pier 39 finally arrived, and Vivian arrived 2 hours early. She sat in her car, watching her surroundings and reflecting on everything that had happened in the past 72 hours. As 9 p.m. hit, she parked her car and stepped out. The cool evening breeze hit her face, but it did nothing to ease her growing anxiety. She glanced around the pier, expecting to see Jason lurking in the shadows as usual. But the place was relatively quiet, with just a few tourists and couples strolling along the waterfront. Vivian checked her phone again. No messages, no calls from Jason. She still couldn't reach Jessica either, which only deepened her unease. It had been days since she last heard from her friend. and the silence felt too loud for her to ignore. She sat on a bench, her gaze drifting toward the water as her thoughts wandered back to the night of Jason's confession. Minutes turned into an hour, but there was no sign of him. The only movement around her came from random passers-by and a man in a wheelchair not far off. Frustration crept in as her anticipation slowly dissolved. She had come all this way, risking everything, only to be left waiting once again. Her anger started to rise. What if Jason didn't show up? What if this was a trap? Just as she decided to leave, the air was shattered by a loud boom in the distance. Vivian froze, her eyes widening in horror as she turned toward the sound. Smoke billowed into the air, the dark cloud rising from somewhere not too far away. People screaming and scrambling for safety. It sounded like a bomb. She grabbed her phone, frantically checking the news. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw the headline: Explosion at Wishful Pharmaceutical Headquarters. The same company whose CEO had been assassinated. The same one Jason had been warning her about. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hands trembling as she watched the live footage on her phone. Flames poured out of the building. People screamed in the background. It was chaotic. From a distance, she could see the smoke rising into the sky, twisting in the wind. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel. Jason hadn't shown up. Was this why? Had he been involved somehow? Or worse, had he been caught in the explosion? She pulled up in front of Jason's house and immediately noticed something was wrong. His windows were all open. Swallowing her fear, she cautiously stepped out of the car and approached the building. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The place was a wreck. Jason's apartment looked like it had been ransacked. Furniture overturned, papers strewn everywhere. It was as if someone had torn the place apart, searching for something. "Jason!" she called out, her voice shaky. No answer. She pulled out her phone again, trying Jason's number, but it went straight to voicemail. She cursed under her breath and turned on her heels, rushing back to her car. She was going crazy. She felt the stirrings of a panic attack, but this was the worst possible moment for her anxiety to return. Especially now, when her life had turned into a full-blown thriller overnight. "Calm down, Vivian," she whispered to herself, trying to steady her breath. She needed to think clearly. The only person who came to mind was Jessica. Without hesitation, she decided to head to Jessica's house. "Jessica!" she called out, her voice rising with desperation. "It's Vivian! Open up!" Vivian's pulse quickened. Something was wrong. Her chest tightened as she glanced at the neighboring houses. She ran to a few of the neighbors, knocking on doors, asking if anyone had seen Jessica recently. "Sorry, dear," one woman said, shaking her head. "I haven't seen her in a while. I figured she was on vacation." Another neighbor echoed the same, adding, "She keeps to herself, but it's been days since I've seen her car." Vivian stood at Jessica's doorstep, knowing exactly where to find the spare key, tucked under the doormat, just like always. She slipped it into the lock and pushed open the door, immediately struck by how pristine everything looked. The place was far too neat, too perfect. Jessica was never one for obsessive tidiness, and the smell of bleach hung in the air, sharp and lingering, as if the house had been wiped clean recently. Her unease grew as she walked through the apartment. Something was off. She opened Jessica's wardrobe, and her heart sank. Several outfits were missing, and so was her passport. Jessica, going on a trip without telling her? It didn't make sense. Vivian glanced at the time. It was already past midnight. Her phone lit up with 6 missed calls from Michael. Without thinking, she dialed him back, the flood of emotions overwhelming her. As soon as he picked up, her voice broke. She poured out the events of the days, the mounting dread, and how she couldn't find Jessica. Michael, calm and steady as always, told her to wait for him, promising that they'd figure it out. But she couldn't wait any longer. She insisted on seeing him immediately. The night air was cool as she drove to Michael's house, her stomach growling with hunger. But all she truly craved in that moment was the comfort of his warm embrace. Maybe a glass of red wine and a long hot bath. As she continued driving, she had the unsettling feeling that a black sedan was following her. But after everything she'd been through, she wondered if it was just her paranoia playing tricks on her. When she arrived, she collapsed into his arms, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't know what's happening anymore," she sobbed. "I can't find Jessica. Nothing makes sense." Michael stroked her hair, his voice soft with reassurance. "We'll go to the police tomorrow," he said, holding her close. "We'll file a missing persons report, and I'll make sure we do everything we can to find her, I promise." After a long bath and a few spoons of jollof rice, he offered to open a bottle of wine to help her relax. "The opener's in my room, top drawer," he said, his smile soothing her nerves for a brief moment. As she walked to his room, she let out a slow breath, trying to push aside the tension tightening in her chest. She searched through the drawer and found the wine opener quickly, but just as she was about to close it, something shiny caught her eye. She pushed a few items aside and froze. There, underneath a pile of cufflinks and loose change, was a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a small pendant. A pendant she recognized all too well, Jessica's necklace. She never took it off, ever. Her fingers trembled as she carefully lifted it from the drawer. A dark stain on the pendant caught the light. Blood. Vivian's heart raced, her breathing becoming shallow. Panic surged through her veins as a cold realization set in. Jessica's necklace, here in Michael's drawer, stained with blood. She took a step back, her mind spinning. What did this mean? What had Michael done? Her body froze. What is this doing here? As quietly as she could, she tucked the drawer shut and moved toward the door, her thoughts a blur. "I need to get out of here. I need to leave, now." She shoved the drawer closed, slipping the necklace into her pocket, and turned toward the door. But as she took a step toward the hallway, her foot caught on the carpet, and a loud thud echoed in the room. Footsteps. Michael appeared in the doorway, his face calm but his eyes too sharp. "Everything okay?" he asked, but his tone sent a chill down her spine. Vivian swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I think I'm going to head home." Michael stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he looked her over. "Why so soon?" he asked. His voice was softer now, but the tension in the air was thick. "You seemed fine just a minute ago." Vivian tried to move past him, but in one swift motion, Michael reached behind his back, and Vivian's heart raced, her mind scrambling for an escape. "Michael, why do you have Jessica's necklace?" she stammered, her eyes flicking to the gun, then back to his face. His smile faltered, and for a brief second, Something dark flickered in his eyes. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said coldly. He took a step closer. "But now that you have, we need to have a little chat." Vivian's hand instinctively went to her pocket, feeling the cool chain of Jessica's necklace. She swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "Michael, where's Jessica?" she whispered. His face hardened, his grip on the gun tightening. "That's none of your business." Vivian felt her blood run cold. "None of my business?" Her voice rose as fear turned to anger. "She's my best friend. I found a necklace in your drawer, Michael, with blood on it. What did you do to her?" "Stop," he interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp, the facade of calm cracking. "You don't understand what you're stepping into." "Step into what? You've been lying to me this whole time, haven't you? Jessica's missing, and I find her necklace with blood on it in your drawer." "What the hell is going on, Michael? What did you do?" "It's not that simple. Jessica overheard something the night Jason broke into your place. Something she wasn't supposed to." Vivian blinked, her blood running cold. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her heart thudding against her chest. "What did she hear?" "She called me," Michael continued, stepping closer, the words rolling out like venom. "She asked me to come over to help deal with Jason. She thought we could put an end to it, figure it out together, and she heard something she wasn't supposed to. She knew too much, Viv. Enough to get her killed." "Killed?" she whispered, disbelief coursing through her veins. You had something to do with it?" Her voice cracked, breaking under the weight of the revelation. "You did this to her?" It wasn't supposed to happen, but she was asking questions. And when people ask too many questions, they get hurt. Vivian's eyes widened, her throat tightening as she took a step back, shaking her head. "You're lying," she stammered. "This can't be true." "She was a liability," Michael interrupted, his voice now dripping with malice. "Just like you're becoming one now, Viv." Panic surged through her body, her mind racing. Jessica had been her best friend, her anchor, and now she was gone. Because of Michael, because of all this mind control. The profilers, the nightmare Jason had dragged her into. She felt her entire world shatter in that moment, her breath coming in shallow gasps. You killed her," she whispered, her voice barely audible as tears welled up in her eyes. "You need to stop digging, Vivian. You're not going to like where this leads." Vivian's heart pounded, her chest tightening as the gun gleamed in the dim light. She had to think fast. "Michael, don't do this," her voice quivered. "We can talk about this. You don't have to do this." "I don't want to, Viv," he said, his voice soft, almost regretful. But the gun didn't waver. "But you forced my hand. You can't leave now." She wasn't going to let him trap her like this. Not after everything she had been through. Not after Jessica. "You're a monster," she spat, her voice raw, eyes filling with tears. "You used me this whole time, didn't you? I didn't want it to come to this. I cared about you, Viv, more than you realize. I only got close to you to keep an eye on Jason and keep him in check. But I started to really care for you. You don't care about anyone but yourself," she said. Vivian's heart leapt into her throat. She had to escape. She couldn't think, couldn't breathe. She edged toward the door slowly, hoping he wouldn't notice her retreat. "I won't tell anyone, I swear," she said. Just let me go." Michael's eyes narrowed. "You're not going anywhere, Viv." In a split-second decision, with all the energy she could summon, Vivian kicked him in his crotch and bolted for the door. "Ah! Vivian, you crazy bitch!" Michael shouted in pain, racing the gun as she yanked the door open and sprinted into the hallway. Her legs moved faster than her thoughts. Behind her, she heard Michael curse, his footsteps echoing after her. She rushed outside, struggling to catch her breath, her body shaking with adrenaline as she ran towards her car. But just as she was about to get in, she noticed her tires were slashed. Perfect. How much worse could today get? Tears filled her eyes, making it hard to see. Suddenly, headlights cut through the darkness, and a car screeched to a stop in front of her. She froze, panic rising in her chest. The driver's window rolled down, and a man's voice called out urgently, "Vivian, get in!" She turned, her eyes wide with disbelief. She recognized him. The man from earlier at Pier 39, the one in the wheelchair, was right there, his face shadowed in the dim light. "Get in now," he repeated with a louder tone. Vivian hesitated for a split second. From the corner of her eye, she saw Michael emerge from the house, running toward her, gun still in hand. Without another thought, she yanked open the car door and jumped inside. "Go!" she screamed. And the man stepped on the gas, speeding away as Michael's figure grew smaller in the rearview mirror.